Hey, what's up? Today we're going to talk about supporting somebody with a mental illness and how to do it. We'll talk about what do we know about the mental illness. We'll talk about what is the most common challenge we encounter and some tips to go around it. And lastly, we will talk about one tip that will work for anyone supporting anyone with a mental illness. Surefire away. So first, what do we know? Understanding what we know, it helps us identify what we don't. A good place to start figuring out what we don't know is writing down and answering the following questions as truthfully as possible. What do I know about this diagnosis? Do we know someone or how someone develops it? Do we know what the symptoms look like? Do we know what the goal of the treatment is? And why is answering these questions a good idea? Let's use schizophrenia as an example. Well, if we say don't know the causes of schizophrenia, there is an opportunity to blame ourselves. Parents, especially, almost torture themselves with the amount of self-doubt that they experience. It's a genetic disorder that we had as much to do with as the color of their hair. And yet, most parents will find a creative way to blame themselves for a patient being or a child being diagnosed with schizophrenia. What are the symptoms? Well, if we don't know that either, we won't know how to tell if somebody's getting better or worse. Most mental illnesses don't really have an objective measurement. There's not really a time that you can look at someone and say, all right, schizophrenia is behind us, depression's behind us. Recovery is a measurement that's very subjective or opinion-based recovery. And it's messy. And quite often it's defined by multiple people, the care team, the person supports, the person themselves. Recovery is not, let's get the cast off. Recovery is, where do I want to be and how do I get there? Okay, so that was the first part of just kind of getting a brief understanding of how do I approach this? What sort of questions should I be asking? How do I get a better understanding of whatever this diagnosis is? How do I support that person through that diagnosis? All right, the second thing that we're going to go through is the most common challenge that anyone faces when they're supporting somebody with a mental illness: burnout. What is burnout that you ask? Well, burnout is just when you have no more gas left in the tank. You can't be that supportive person anymore, physically, emotionally, psychologically. We're just out of gas. Now, each mental illness, they all have varying symptoms. And those symptoms actually make it pretty easy to become burnt out. It's actually deceptively easy to become burnt out. For many mental illnesses, a common challenge is we're sort of helping people who may not totally agree that they need help. Now, try and think of it this way. We're at home, we're on the couch, there's a sink full of dirty dishes. Now, we plan to do these dishes in a few minutes. We really do. Just, show's ending or whatever. So we're looking at something, it's about the end. We're just waiting for that, right? Now, before we can get up and do them, though, our spouse, our parent, our roommate, whoever comes out and they're like, hey, do the dishes. A lot of us aren't going to do those dishes anymore. Why? Well, put it simple, it's not our choice anymore. Someone told us to do it. Same rules apply to telling somebody to engage in treatment. If we're telling somebody what to do, if we're telling them the interventions to do, and we're not building them with them, they won't do them. For example, someone with depression, they may grill us on, well, what's the point of going out for a run? Somebody with schizophrenia may become paranoid of us at any point, and they might begin believing that our support is actually harmful to them. What are you putting in those medications? Is a very common hurdle for people supporting somebody with paranoia to overcome. Somebody with dyslexia, well, they may have a lot of harshness in their tones if they believe that we're implying something about their intelligence when we offer to support them reading. It's simple to get burnt out. It really is. And it's because the people that we're supporting, they'll almost give us every reason to kind of get to a point of burnout. Bonus tip, how do we prevent burnout? Well, there's two general rules to follow, and I mean rules. We need to set these rules and we need to abide by them. First one is self-care. However it looks, however we engage in it, it's self-care. Now, this is kind of like the oxygen on the airplane sort of moment. If we're on a plane with a loved one that we're caring for, and the oxygen masks, they drop down at some point for whatever reason, we need to put our own on first before helping anyone else. If we don't, we might pass out, and then we can't support that person anyway. Self-care is the oxygen. We will need to identify what we can do to keep us going. Second is set your own boundaries. No one will tell you when you've supported enough. There is no objective measurement for supporting someone with a mental illness. You'll never know where that line is. You're going to have to make one for yourself. The person we're caring for, they won't know the limit either, and it's not on them to decide. That's on us. Opposite to that, though, we will have every reason to push ourselves past our boundaries. So we want to be ready for that. We want to be ready for that self-doubt. We will eventually ask ourselves, am I being too selfish here? And answer that question honestly. Sometimes, yeah, we might be. We might have a good reason to do something selfish. We might have really pushed ourselves beyond our limits. We might need to go engage in a lot of self-care. So long as it's fair, so long as it's fair for the people we're caring for, but also fair to ourselves. Keep this balance keeps the guilt in check. We find our own boundaries and we stick to them. Lastly, one surefire tip for anyone supporting, or in honestly anybody through any kind of challenge, but specifically it works a lot with mental health. Talk. And that will be surprisingly hard. Talking, it helps us vent our frustrations. Talking helps us vent, and that venting, it helps us work through all those hormones that are going through our bodies when we're stressed or angry. It's sort of like exercising, but to a lesser extent. We're using built up energy instead of sitting on it. Will we feel guilty for venting? Yeah, most likely. We then talk about that too. Why do we feel guilty? Should we feel guilty? We're not the only people experiencing this challenge. Connecting with others in similar situations, that can really help us validate our own efforts and remind us of the work that we've done so far. Peer support groups, networks, they're amazing places to find people going through similar challenges as us, and they can provide an invaluable place to relax and recuperate.